Welcome back to Life and Art with Nicole, and I am your host, Nicole. This is a weekly podcast where we discuss different lifestyle topics such as books, acting, music, art, television, health, wellness, spirituality, and a variety of other topics. And I'm very excited because today I am joined by my very special guest, Nuri Durr, also known as Action Hank Beard on Instagram and his socials. And Nuri is an artist, an illustrator, and a character designer. So we're going to have a really cool chat about art and all of those things that encompass that. So make sure to stay tuned. Yeah, so Action Hank Beard, where did that name come from?
So the name Action Hank Beard, when I first joined Instagram, I think it was around maybe 2012 or so. I was trying to come up with a username, and I always would default to using my name whenever I could, but it was taken. So I needed to come up with something. And at the time, I was watching Dexter's Laboratory, and it was the episode about Action Hank. And for those who don't remember, Action Hank was the big action hero, 18 Mr. T type character. He was like a parody of Mr. T, and just a big sweaty muscle dude with a beard. And I was like, I have a beard. I don't have the muscles, but it's close enough. So I went with that, and it's just kind of what I've been using ever since then.
That's so fun. So clearly you were inspired by cartoons and whatnot, right? Growing up.
Yeah, it's always been. I like those cartoons in general, and they influenced me in more ways than just the name, but also like in the style of my work, I would say, and a lot of the inspiration behind the subject matter that I work with.
Yeah. So how long have you been an artist? Like how long have you been, when did it start for you, as a like drawing and illustrating and whatnot?
Well, for me, it was as far back as I can remember. I can remember like vividly um, being into drawing as far back as at least 4, maybe 3. My older brother at the time used to draw too, and like he was really good at it, and so I used to like copy him. And I would always try and get him to draw things for me that I like Ninja Turtles and stuff. And like at first he would do it, but then after a while he was just like, I don't want to do it because he didn't feel like being bothered with it. And I was like, okay. So I would try and do it on my own, and I would just draw on anything I had. Like my mom said, I used to draw on the walls and stuff. I used to draw in books, like in like Dr. Seuss books, those first couple of pages that are blank. Anything that was like something that I could basically draw on that was blank, I would try and draw on it. And I would just draw the things that interest me at the time, which was pretty much the same things that interest me now. But that's kind of how it started. It's really as far back as I can remember. I always liked drawing. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
remember when I was young, I used to draw a lot, and that's like why I'm so impressed by your work because you just are so good, and it's clear that you've kept up with it. If I tried to even draw again, like my cartoon stick figures are like probably worse now than they used to be. But I used to love to do that too, and I feel like art kind of like hits you like as a child, like and it's like once you're struck by it, then you stick to it no matter what your field is.
Hmm.
And so I see all the like figurines behind you, and I notice a lot of this, like a lot of the kind of maybe anime that like
Hmm.
that kind of signature comes up in your work. Is anime like a big inspiration for you? Do you watch a lot of anime?
Honestly, these days I don't watch it as much as I used to because it's not a lot of new anime, I think, that interests me in the same way that it did when I was younger. But
Mhm.
for sure, it definitely played a big part in um, everything that I like in terms of like my style of art. Um, like I have like memories of watching Dragon Ball Z back in middle school with the rest of my friends. So it was a thing that we all kind of did together. And like you mentioned, like drawing when you was younger, and it's not. I don't think it's uncommon for people to like really get into art when they're kids or when they're young because it's kind of like a thing that I think most kids will do. It's just a matter of whether or not they stick with it. And like for me, I liked it so much that it was always what I would be doing. If I wasn't like playing a game or outside with my friends, I would be drawing. And I had friends like that who also like would draw and they were pretty good at it, but like a lot of them ended up doing other things or they got influenced by something else and they didn't really stick with it. So like today, if I see some of those friends I had from like middle school or high school, they'll be like, "You still drawing?" I'm like, "Yeah." I always like to draw. I'm not going to necessarily stop because I got older or anything. So yeah, anime definitely has a big influence. 'Cause I like animation in general, not even just anime, but at the time growing up, I watched Toonami. I used to watch Dragon Ball Z on UPN. They should show like the
UPN, wow,
same.
that's like such a throwback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because at the time, like that was my first exposure to it, and um, like we struggled growing up, so we didn't always even have cable and stuff. So when I first saw it, it was on something like UPN, and like I didn't know what it was, but I just remember it being cool, and they would show like the same few episodes, like kind of reruns and stuff. But I just was like captivated by like the style of it, and like the quality of the animation it seemed so much higher than what we had here at the time in the
Mhm.
US. So that was what appealed to me about it.
Yeah.
And I would draw characters that, kind of in the style of Dragon Ball, in the style of Sonic, in the style of like whatever it was that I was really into at that time.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Did
So all these things you see are the things I grew up on, like the
Yeah.
toys and posters and stuff. I keep it around because it's still like it's a big influence on my work to this day. And I mean, I'm a firm believer in kind of surrounding yourself with things that inspire you, and keep you kind of motivated and whatnot. So I just
Yeah,
have art and
that's
things.
awesome. Did you ever used to do the, like, the flip, cartoons? You know, you draw on, like, on one page, and then you turn the page, and you draw, like, the next scene, and then you kind of flip it so that it goes really, really fast. Because I used to do those. I used to draw.
I've never done anything like that because
Really?
I've never, yeah, I think um, just the nature of drawing iterations of the same thing over and over again gets too monotonous for me.
Mm, okay.
Like, like I work in animation as of now, but like I work as a character designer, and your job as a character designer is just that of like you're responsible for doing like the actual designs of characters, whether that be like the main cast or incidental characters, which are just background characters, and it usually consists of like a 5 point turn or a 3/4 front and back turn,
Hmm.
and these are just the designs for like um, people to reference when they're trying to, animate these characters and whatnot. So that's what my job would consist of. It's that and doing special poses, which are just like key poses in animation that, kind of call out specific moments in an animation. So like kind of just standalone drawings of characters.
Hmm.
And then that's given to the animators, and that's usually like overseas somewhere. And they will take that and they'll animate the entire scene based
Oh,
on
wow.
those things, using that as like their guide. So they
So
have
it's like that's their template, and then they build the movement from that.
essentially we get storyboards, and the storyboard images that we get, we take that and the specific scenes that they call out for us to work on. That's what we would draw for the special poses, and then that's sent back to the people overseas, and then they use that as reference when they're animating. So when the completed animation comes back to us, like you'll see it kind of play out, and you'll be able to spot like the poses and things that you drew in there.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah,
That's
so that part's pretty cool. But I don't, I won't say that I would never animate, but I know how I am when it comes to certain things. There's certain things that I do and don't like, and animation, drawing, because it's very labor intensive. It's like
Mhm.
drawing comics. It's also it's a labor of love. You have to kind of like really like that kind of thing in order to really do it effectively, I think. And I don't see myself doing it. I used to say I wanted to do it when I was younger, but I realized like, oh, you got to draw this much stuff to get just a couple of seconds of animation. And I
I know,
was
I'm
like, I
always
don't
so
know.
impressed. I'm always so impressed when, you do I watch the behind the scenes and you see the artists like spending so much time yeah, doing the animation for whether it's regular animation or even claymation. I think to me is the most interesting. And I know that's not
Mhm.
necessarily drawing. I don't know, maybe does it start from drawing and then it kind of builds into the clay, or I mean, do you know anything about that?
I would imagine that like it starts with a storyboard like everything else
Mm,
because a storyboard just gives you like a sequence of events to follow.
sure.
But with claymation and stuff like that, that's like stop motion and like I
Yeah.
mean that's its own form of tedium, if you like to do it. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Kubo and the Two Strings, but that's a pretty cool stop motion film.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that one, but I've seen others and I've watched the behind the scenes, and
Hmm.
it takes so long because they have to put it together and then film it, and then the people come
Basically
in
bit
and
by bit.
yeah, bit
Yeah.
by bit, and that is extremely labor intensive, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
"Wow, that's a whole, like" that's I don't know, that's a whole other thing,
Yeah.
but so as far as, like, actual animation, like, pen to paper type, you prefer, like, just to draw the static character in whatever position and then let the the other
Hmm.
people kind of,
Yeah.
like, make it come to life.
I
Yeah, I
like to draw in general. So like I like to draw cool things. And I think that's why I gravitate towards things that involve like design and stuff like that, or just finished
mhm,
illustrations. And I mean, you're gonna work no matter what because the nature of art is to just it's gonna require a lot of like hard work, but it just depends on your brand of hard work. For me,
yeah,
it's just like I like drawing, like kind of finished drawings and illustrations. And some other people like to do comics, they like to tell stories.
yeah,
And I mean, I think all of that stuff is fun. Um, I would probably dabble in a few things here and there, but I think the thing that I enjoy most is being able to draw something, finish it, and move on to something else. Being tied
mhm.
down to one thing too long can get to be, I start to get a little bit restless, I think.
Yeah, sure. So you said you were working with the WB, is that right? Or was it a different network or
It was with WB. So we just finished wrapping up production on Velma. And
wow, that's
that was,
awesome.
I joined in on the second season and I stayed through the second season in the Halloween special, which we were just working on. And I've been working with WB since for about 2 years now.
Mhm.
I've worked on 3 different productions since I started, and yeah, that before that, I didn't really do anything that was. I wasn't working full time in animation or anything. I did a few like freelance gigs here and there
Mhm.
in little projects, but I had never done anything in animation of this
Yeah.
capacity up until that point. So
How was that experience maybe working with a larger network? Because WB is huge. It's a huge a huge,
yeah.
yeah, network. So how, like, did you enjoy that experience? Or is it, compared to doing freelance work, or, do you like the ability to be more free in what you do, or do you like that kind of structured capacity?
Well, in the beginning, because it was new to me, it was a little bit kind of nerve wracking because I didn't know what would be expected of me starting out. So it's kind of like, you get brought on, they kind of show you the ropes, and then like, they turn you loose to kind of do your thing. And like traditionally, you would do this at the studio out in like Burbank, but I'm here in Atlanta, and
Mm,
ever since like 2020 with everything with COVID, they made it to where, it was people working remote. And
yeah,
when I started working here, it was remote. And I mean, that's convenient for me because essentially like I work, um, I show up for meetings related to work and things like that. And, I submit assignments in ahead of the deadline. But how you spend your time getting things done in between all of that is completely up to you. So it's good for me because it allows me a lot of flexibility because I'm here with my babies. But um, after the first production, I was like, okay, it's not as scary as I thought it would be. Kind of working on a production, and like because you're part of a team, you get to rely on other people to kind of help you if you ever feel like getting kind of lost. And of course, we have an art director who we submit our things to, and then if there's changes that need to be made to anything we submit, they let us know.
mhm,
And I mean, that's pretty much it. Because I'm working full time, I'm drawing a lot more, even though people don't really get to see most of what I draw because it's NDA. But
sure.
the nature of drawing this much forces you to improve, and um, it's probably the most drawing I've done since I was like a kid. Like when I got older and you get responsibilities, it's like you
Right.
draw when you have the time, but
Yeah.
when the drawing becomes like your actual full time job, then you're drawing most of the time again. And so
Mhm.
I've noticed that I think I've definitely become a lot stronger as an artist as a result of my time working in animation. And it's good to be able to have that because I can take those skills and then apply it to like my personal work. So when I'm not
Mhm.
working full time, I can get back to doing my own thing, which is what I'm doing now because um, my time with WB has ended for the time being. So
Yeah.
all those things that I've been kind of picking up on, those skills, I can apply it to my own personal work.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the fact that were able to you're able to, do what you love, or I'm guessing you love it because you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
Uh, and to be able to do that for like a big network, and to even be able to participate in an animated series is so cool because you just mentioned a few minutes ago, you mentioned you grew up watching cartoons and now you get
Yeah.
to kind of it's like come full circle, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that a lot too, because I can think back to a time where I would never have imagined myself kind of being in this position, or at least not knowing how I would get to this position. Because there
Yeah.
was a time where I was like, I would talk about wanting to work in animation, but it always seemed like this far off thing in my mind. It was just like, I don't know what I would necessarily need to do to close that gap, but it's the one thing that I could always see myself doing. Something, a career related to art in some capacity, because there's not really much outside of this that I really enjoy.
Mhm.
Like I like cooking, but I don't see myself cooking as a profession. I like to cook because I like to
You
eat.
don't wanna you don't wanna be a chef, you don't wanna be a personal chef.
No, I wouldn't want to do that. That's too much. Like my interest in cooking goes as far as like I don't want to go out spend a bunch of money on food, and I like to eat, and I like good food. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand.
that's it for me. Outside
Yeah.
of that, I don't really know what else. Maybe something dealing with game development or something. I don't know, but
Oh,
uh,
that would be really cool, like, be a, animator or illustrator or whatever for, like, a video game or something? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, or just like because if I have to remove the art component of it, because it like I mean I've done some work related to games now, but like if I wasn't an artist, if I didn't actually draw, I would probably be into the development side of maybe games and stuff because that was something
Mm,
that I liked a lot as a kid too, games.
yeah,
So um maybe something in that line of work, but
yeah.
yeah, I really don't know what I would do without having art. It's
I
the one thing that
know.
makes me happy consistently.
I know, and that's why, like, I think it's so impressive, and just kudos to you to be able to monetize your art in such a way and be able to pursue it. Just because as an artist in my own right, it's to me, art is the most fulfilling, and in this world, all the chaos that we're like kind of around and we hear especially through the media and stuff, like having
Hmm.
art to fall back on or art as a means of like kind of going off into your own world, is great. And, I'm sure over the years you've kind of, you know, used art as like kind of a refuge, right? I mean, I know I have, and whether it's writing, whether it's acting for me, dance, which is a sort of artistic medium, but for you, I'm sure like I don't know, like, have you used art as, like, a way of, like, healing almost?
Well, I would say that it's the thing that I go to um, most often. I wouldn't. I don't know if I would say I use it for healing per se, but I definitely use it like for my own peace of mind.
Yeah.
It's something that I kind of do even when I'm not. So like if I'm not drawing, I'm always thinking about drawing, and it's like the thing that I'm thinking about. Like if I'm out, maybe with family or something like that, or I'm out, I'm doing something that involves me being away from my desk. My mind is always kind of working in terms of like things that I want to work on when I get back home. And I don't always work on those things when I get home because sometimes I'm tired or whatever, but I'm at least always thinking about it. And it's
Mhm.
like, even when I'm working on stuff that's related to work, like I'm drawing stuff for work, I'm always thinking about what I'm going to draw for myself once this is done. And I mean, it's kind of how it's always been about it. I just like drawing that
Yeah,
much that it's the thing that I think about doing most consistently, more
yeah,
than anything else, I would say. So,
yeah. What's, like, so interesting is I feel like, as an artist, well, particularly as a illustrator type artist, you're kind of imagining a whole other world and then putting it to paper. I mean, I know obviously there's inspiration and you're like, oh, and you kind of, and maybe I'm sure when people reach out to you for personal, uh, personal illustrations, you draw what they kind of recommend or what they request.
Hmm.
But otherwise, it's almost like you're tapping into like another universe in a sense, and then you're bringing it here. What do you think of that?
I mean, I think you're right because I mean, to be a creative is essentially making something new. Even when you're taking something that is existing, you're usually bringing some element to it that is you that wasn't part of it initially. So whether that be a commission that somebody paid me for, or like something for like my job, anything like that, you're bringing some small element of that that is like inherently you that only you would think to do and not somebody else. And I like stuff like that. It's what kind of draws me to like art and other people's art in general because I like to see um how they would interpret the same idea, how would they arrive to some of these decisions that they make. And yeah, I mean, you are essentially creating world. I mean, you might quite literally be creating worlds if you're actually telling stories through your art, whether that be through animation or comics or even just like a standalone image. And I think that's the part that people like kind of latch on to the most when they look at art. I think that's what resonates with people the most is like that story element in the art.
Yeah. Well, because even like your static images, they don't even have to be like multiple, storytelling style or in storyboard format, but even your
Hmm.
static images tell a story,
Yeah.
whether it's I don't know, some anime looking person doing something and then another anime looking person is doing something else. Whatever it is, there's something happening in the scene that we're kind of witnessing.
Yeah.
Um
I
yeah,
think
so
the best artwork tells the story and on some level. And it can be something very subtle. It could be something very kind of like explicit, but I think having something that gives the people that's viewing it, something to kind of, interpret it in their head and try and figure out what's happening. I think that's the thing that people respond to the most.
mhm.
So I encourage that in other people. People ask me questions about like, what kind of art people enjoy or what kind of art should they be doing. And I mean, my first response is always to kind of do the kind of art that you enjoy first and foremost, but also when it comes to people who like what are other people interested in when it comes to art? And the answer for me has always been like something that they can find relatable, some kind of story or something that they can see and maybe identify with it, maybe find some type of like, doesn't have to be anything deep, but it can be something that they can look at and they can maybe find something in like something meaningful in other than just the finished drawing itself. Like, oh, this is just a cool, pretty picture. They
Yeah.
might see a story element or something like that in there as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really cool. Do you have any artists that you are, particularly drawn to or that inspire you?
I have a lot of artists that inspire me, probably more than I can even think to list. Um,
Maybe like top 3.
so you talked about animation earlier. One of my favorites is Gendy Tartakovsky. Gendy Tartakovsky is the guy behind Samurai Jack. He's
Oh.
also the one involved with like Primal, which is more recent, which is on Max, formerly HBO Max.
Mhm.
Um, I like him in particular because I like his shape language and I like his colors in a lot of those cartoons. But I also like that the storytelling in his cartoons they generally deal with like it's not a whole lot of like verbal storytelling. It's not a whole lot of exposition. It's more so told through the visuals and the actions. Some shows like Primal, they don't even have much dialogue at all because it takes place during a time where there isn't really like a lot of spoken language. It's just like a caveman and a dinosaur, but you can follow what's happening because of the beat by beat um story. So I like stuff like that for more than just the visual art style,
Mhm.
but also just like the story element as a whole. Um, yeah, it's a lot of things, man. I couldn't
You
even
said
think.
Well, so real quick, you said shape language. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
What does that mean? Like how yeah, what is that? Can you kind of go into detail about that?
So shape language would be taking something and making it, I guess, exaggerating it to the point where it's you're pushing the proportions of something so that it looks more dynamic, more interesting to look at.
Oh, wow.
So to give you an example that you can picture in your mind, if you've seen Samurai Jack before, you know how angular the shapes are.
Yeah.
It's very graphic, I would say, in the style because they don't use black outlines for the characters.
Mm,
Everything is kind of defined by like these angular shapes and these colors. And the colors are
mm,
what help to separate the forms and the details.
mm,
So I like it for that reason because it's more stylistic
mhm,
than something that would be, um, I don't know, I guess more realistic in its style. I like
mhm.
stuff that looks fantastical and stuff that looks more imaginative. So anything that does something fun with shapes. This is why I like that era of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon so much is because
Yeah.
the character designs are always really wacky and cartoony.
Yeah.
You think about stuff like Dexter's Laboratory and
Yeah.
Powerpuff Girls,
Yeah.
or even like Hey Arnold.
Mhm.
All
I
of
was
these
just
older
thinking.
cartoons,
Yeah.
yeah, these like you see that in newer cartoons and stuff as well. But
Yeah.
the thing that all these things have in common is that they all have their own distinctive shape language. They
Hmm.
have their own distinctive art style, and
Wow. Yeah.
it's recognizable as something that is like these are supposed to be people. You recognize them as like people, but they don't have the realistic proportions of like a real person. They
Mhm.
have like maybe a big torso and small legs,
Yeah.
and
Or big
it's always
head.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And like in artist speak, you would describe that as like big, medium, small, and that
Mm,
basically means you choose certain aspects of the character to exaggerate or like de-emphasize. So when I worked as a caricature artist, what we did was you would take a person's most prominent features and you would exaggerate them. So if they had a big nose, you would make them probably have a really big nose, but you might make something like the eye smaller to give it more balance
hmm.
so that it's not, big nose, big eyes, big lips, big head, big everything. Sometimes you have to
Yeah.
kind of like you exaggerate some features and you downplay others.
Mhm.
And you get like this kind of back and forth thing going where there's a sense of like balance to it,
Yeah.
but it still makes sense to the eye of the
Mhm.
viewer so that it doesn't look, I don't know, out of place. It's kind of
Yeah.
hard to describe without showing, but I think
Yeah.
you get the idea.
Yeah, I do get the idea, and because actually that's my favorite era of cartoons. Yeah, tongue twister right there. My favorite era of cartoons is that like sort of mid to late 90s Nickelodeon Cartoon Network era, and I feel like well, one, we've moved more into like the Pixar kind of style and everything now,
Hmm.
especially if you watch, well, you have small kids, and I don't know if they're watching cartoons or not yet, but the cartoons these days that you see on like Nick Jr., they're like Pixar style or almost like uh uh virtual kind of. They're not even drawn. And I'm like, it's weird. I get this, like I can't even watch it because I feel like I get headaches. Because I'm like, where are the lines? What's happening? Like I
So
just
what you're describing is you're describing CGI. You're
yeah,
describing
okay. Yeah.
you know 3D renders versus 2D
Yeah.
animation.
And I like
I
2D. Yeah.
I like both,
Mhm.
but I definitely have more interest in 2D animation.
Yeah.
Um, and because we grew up in like I was born in '88, so we grew up in the '90s,
Yeah.
and we were more familiar with 2D animation because that was how it was done back then.
Yeah.
And like specifically like hand drawn 2D animation,
Yeah.
which is me. Like we used to have cartoons that were drawn on paper
Mhm.
in hand painted cells, but
Yeah.
now things are done digitally,
Yeah.
and it still looks good, but
Mhm.
like there's a there's like a cutoff point where people kind of see the change. There's a change in the way that the animation looks, and that's because there was a jump from traditional to digital,
Mm.
and it's mostly born out of convenience and like technology. But
Yeah.
with that also came 3D animation. So you start to see cartoons that rely on like CGI a lot more
Mm.
because it's for the most part it's cheaper to produce. It's not as expensive. Hand drawn 2D animation stuff is It's more labor intensive. It's more expensive. With 3D
Yeah.
animation, you can create like a 3D model, and then you can make like rigs and stuff for it to kind of move these characters about in this space.
Yeah.
And we've seen like really good examples of this in shows like um, there was a new Ninja Turtles cartoon that
Mhm.
came out in 2012, which is a good example of that. But
Mhm.
also in like movies, like the Pixar movies, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of movies nowadays, a lot of animated movies, they rely on 3D animation. The new Super
Yeah.
Mario Brothers movie, is another good example of that.
Yeah.
All these are things that look good, but I guess it just comes down to what your preference is.
Yeah, and I'm old school. I was also born in like, mid 80s. So like for
Yeah.
me, growing up with the Disney movies, all the Disney princess movies, and now the princess movies are all CGI or they're all kind of the Pixar kind of version, which is fine. Like
Mhm.
I love the Moana style, like that what they're doing with the Moana, but I also love Beauty and the Beast and I love Cinderella, which, they hand drew it and they actually hand drew the actual, women based off of actual actresses. They would have the actress come in and then she would
Mhm.
pose and then they would draw her pose. And then I guess another illustrator would come in and put movement to her. But, so I like that I guess because I am biased because that's what I grew up with. But so I do prefer that, but I feel like even now, like in the really like the newest type of cartoons, it's like difficult to watch. Like if you what like what's the show with the Paw Patrol? Paw Patrol is that's kind of like it's okay, I can deal with it, but then I don't know, sometimes I just feel like I'm watching just a computer game on like this TV, and I'm like, this doesn't even look like a cartoon anymore. It looks like I'm watching computer. But what's interesting is you had with the anime you just said a few minutes ago, you were talking about the different uh what was it what did I ask you about? I can't even remember. It
The
was
cutoff point between the digital and traditional.
Yeah, but I was you were specifically talking about the different styles, like that you said you mentioned an anime artist that you like a lot, and he did the
Oh, you
Samurai
mean
Jack. Yeah.
okay, Gendy Tartakovsky. Yeah, he
Yeah,
does Western. So that's Western animation, and
oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't classify him as anime. You would
Oh, okay, I
classify
wouldn't. Okay, because
yeah,
uh,
anime would be things like Dragon Ball Z,
yeah, and
Naruto.
like I was gonna ask you about Naruto because that's actually the next thing I was gonna say is with Naruto because you were talking about you can see the difference in the color style. Is that what was that what you called it? Color
Well,
character style? I can't remember what
so
it.
in anime, um, I think the appeal of anime for a long time, for especially for us in the West growing up, was that the production value was a lot higher than what we had here for the most part with Western animation. Like characters moved in a way that you just didn't really see all that often here.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
off the top of my head, the only good examples I can think of where it was just like, this looks really good is if you remember the intro to Rugrats. That
yes,
was very well animated, but that's
it
because
was.
that animation sequence was not done here. It was like that was outsourced.
Mm,
And another example of that would be like the intro to Thundercats. But when you
yes,
watch Thundercats versus like the intro to Thundercats, there's a clear difference in terms of like how
right,
much budget went into the show itself and the
right.
animation of the intro. A lot of
Mhm,
those intros and things were outsourced overseas.
mhm.
So it took me a while to realize that this stuff that we see in anime is kind of like that's normal. That's just how a lot of their shows look. And
Yeah.
even stuff that has like a cheaper budget, still it looked to me better than everything that we had here in the
Mhm.
West. The movie Akira came out like in the 80s, and that movie still to this day like looks like top tier.
Yeah.
It looks better than anything that we had going on in the 90s, I think. And
Mhm.
so and that was during a time where like the animation was done traditionally. They hand painted those backgrounds and
Wow.
they animated those things um by hand. So
Mhm.
I'm like a traditional artist. for the most part. Like I do work digitally, but like for the longest, I've always worked traditional, and that's what
Yeah.
appeals to me the most. So I think that's what explains my affinity for that era of animation,
Yeah.
in particular, because
Mhm.
I'm knowing in my mind like this was made by hand. Somebody painted these things by hand, like those Studio Ghibli movies, like
Mhm.
um, Princess Mononoke, and all of those types of those were like hand painted backgrounds and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so in anime, that's not uncommon to see, especially like older anime. You see
Mhm.
that those higher production values and like um, subject matter that we just didn't really get at the time because of a lot of like, well, some of it was censorship, other things was just like um, they felt as though Western audiences wouldn't really be able to understand what's happening. So they would like when we did get certain shows here, like when Pokemon came here. Um, you see characters eating those little rice cakes, but they called them donuts here because they felt as though Western audiences wouldn't be smart enough to
Wow.
recognize this as a thing that's, it's just these are the changes that they made to try and I guess appeal to a different demographic. But ultimately, they didn't really need to do that. They could have just said this is what it
Right.
is, and we would have got behind it because it still was fun to watch. But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's well, yeah, and exactly. And I do appreciate, the Japanese style. And that's why I was going to mention Naruto because I'm currently watching the series. I'm on like the towards the end of
Hmm.
Shippuden. I can't remember how to pronounce it, but
That's how you pronounce it.
Shippuden, yeah.
Shippuden.
And
Yeah.
what I had commented or what I'd noticed is there are like 3 or 4 different illustrators because you can tell the difference in the fighting sequences.
Hmm.
And I always notice it because the lines change. And I'm watching, I'm like, oh, there's a different animator right there. And I always, because there's one animator that like really stretches the characters out, and
Hmm.
a lot of the angles are shot from looking down, and like kind of following the character down below. They're very stylized. Whereas like the primary illustrator animator, it kind of sticks to a very like simplistic style with the heavy kind of black lines. But I can always tell when they switch because the colors change slightly, the shape of the faces change slightly, and then like the way the action sequences are, they're either really really stretched out, really long. Stretched out meaning like it looks like the camera almost like kind of does that thing.
Hmm.
Even though it's not a camera, it's like it's all by hand. They do a very good job of that. And so I don't know if have you noticed do you notice stuff like that when you're watching stuff? You're like, oh, there's a different animator or a different illustrator.
So what you're describing is something that we all kind of noticed, um, kind of subconsciously growing up, but couldn't really put a finger on it. And that's it's one of those things where like you can tell when they go on into that budget for the animation.
Oh
In
yeah.
Naruto in particular, you have like mostly filler episodes of just like there's nothing really important happening.
Right.
So the animation is it's good, but it's not anything to like go up about necessarily. But
Right.
then like major events take place. It's like a major battle, and then it's just like the animation quality tends to kind of step up because they want
Yeah.
to highlight this important sequence. And there are events where, or there are instances rather, where you would see the style of animation kind of change. And like in Naruto Shippuden in particular, um, I don't know if you've made it this far yet, but there's a battle where the Leaf Village gets invaded by Pain
Yeah.
and his crew.
Hmm.
And there's a fight that happens where the style of the animation style of the show changes
Yeah.
dramatically.
Yep.
And
I
it's
know.
it's kind of a
Yep.
divisive point in
Hmm.
the series because some people liked it, some people hated it. But animation wise, I thought it was cool the way that everything played out. But
Hmm.
that was because that they brought on an animator, a specific animator for that sequence. That's not
Mm,
how all the battles in Naruto look, but
yeah.
that one in particular, it sticks out because it's like it was handled a little bit differently to
Yeah.
what people might have been used to in certain
Yep.
other parts of the anime.
Hmm.
So I think that's one of the cool things about animation is that you can sometimes get like these superstar animators and people to kind of come on and do their thing, and you definitely see it.
Hmm.
Certain studios like Studio Trigger, Studio Mappa. they have like a reputation for having this high bar when it comes to the quality of their animation.
Mhm.
And like you have certain names within those fields, that like, you think about like you talk to people who, who are like the people that inspire them or people that they look up to. They might bring up some celebrity or somebody like that. But for people who work in animation, we think about
Mhm.
like animators and
Yeah.
directors, and it's like, yeah, I want my work to be on the level of this guy because that's the standard that we hold ourselves to when we're thinking about our art and how we want it to look. You know?
Mhm. I really like Michael Dante DiMartino. I don't know if he's the actual animator, but he's the one who created the Avatar: The Last Airbender series.
Okay.
Um, and I that to me is my very favorite style. Just because, especially you've seen that. Have you seen that series?
I've seen Avatar. Yeah.
Yeah, I my favorite is not necessarily the beginning. The beginning is kind of childish, but when it gets to like the very very end, and he has, he's going through all the fights with the Fire Lord, and they're fighting against, Zuko's fighting his sister, and then they have the lightning sequences and the music. To me, it's just so like beautiful, and I love that. I just love that style, and that's probably my very favorite style of animation. And another one of my very favorite styles is, have you seen the show Vox Machina on Amazon?
I haven't yet. I've been meaning to check it out, but I've
It's
seen
pretty
some
good.
of it.
It's
Yeah.
a pretty good series, and it's like so good. Like I will watch a whole series in like 2 days. Like I'll just like keep watching all the episodes because they're pretty short episodes. But
Yeah.
that's one of my other. I love that animation style. Also, I mean, the show is a little vulgar, but I just love that story. I love that type of like fantastical storyline. But I love those two styles. I don't know how similar they are. I don't know if they're using the same shape shape thing that you had mentioned earlier. I can't remember what you said. Um, Shape design, I guess. Yes, I don't know if they're doing that, but there's something about those two particular shows that stand out to me.
Well, I mean, it could be that there's always going to be elements of one show that are reminiscent of another thing that you like. Like Avatar is a good example of that. Avatar is what we would describe as maybe like Western anime because
Mhm.
it's not anime in the sense that it came out of Japan, but it definitely has the sensibilities of something that might have. It looks stylistically, it looks kind of like anime. The way that they draw the noses and the eyes and the characters themselves, they have a style that's close to that of what you would expect from anime. Boondocks is another example of that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
okay.
so like it looks good. Like Boondocks is a good example of a show that like it looked good in the first season, but by the third season, like the budget went up, and you can see in the like the detail of the characters and the animation, it kind of increases from that point afterwards. Season four
Yeah.
wasn't good, but it still looked good, even though it wasn't funny. But yeah, with Avatar, that's much of the same, and then with Avatar, you had like Legend of Korra, which came after that, kind of
Yes,
the same thing.
that was good.
So you see the influence of Japanese animation
Hmm.
happening with more Western animation. So you see a lot more shows now kind of adopting like almost like a hybrid of the two. One more recent show is My Adventures with Superman. Kind of has an anime style to it. I don't know if you've seen Invincible on Amazon Prime, but
Yeah,
that's another
wow,
one.
that one is kind of intense, but yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
show.
So, same thing, all of these shows in like in some cases, yeah, it will be literally like people who worked on another production came over to this production,
Mm,
and depending on the role they play, they may have more influence on the look of that show than something else. So if they're in a director position, they're literally responsible for coming up with the style, the look and the style of the show. And if it's something that say they were influenced by Avatar, um, they may have a lot of that DNA in this show as well, at least in terms of the style. They may
yeah,
go for something that is like reminiscent of that. A lot of times when these shows and things are like in their blue sky production, which basically means they're trying to figure out what is this thing even going to be. Um, they put together what is essentially like a collection of things that they want represented in the style. So they'll have multiple examples, kind of like a an influence map of sorts,
Hmm.
where they'll have different examples from different things, games, cartoons, movies, or whatever, to kind of like give an idea of how they envision this show to look, how they
Yeah.
envision the characters, the environments, and you'll kind of use all these different things to kind of approximate, um, how you want this new show to look. So you'll pull ideas from different sources, essentially, to make
Yeah.
something new. And sometimes it's very apparent. Sometimes um, it's a little bit more subtle. But that's one of the things about animation and like art in general that I enjoy is that you get to see the things that people are inspired by. Um, like we talked about, like Gendy Tartakovsky, and a lot of his animation, it deals with just like environmental storytelling,
Hmm.
um, silent storytelling, and things like that. The
Yeah.
way that his shows are like framed is very cinematic, and you can tell that like a lot of the inspiration behind it comes from movies, not other cartoons. And so it's cool to be able to kind of pick up on that stuff. And then like once you are in it, like I'm actually in it myself, working in animation. You get to see behind the scenes how some of these things come together, and it's always pretty cool.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love how you know so much about art. I mean, I guess it's expected, right? It's what you do, and
Yeah, I mean, you do it for a living, or even if you don't do it for, you might just like enjoy art, and with anything, I would expect, you know, anything that you enjoy, I would expect people to know a lot about it.
right. Yeah.
So
Same. I totally agree. Wow, well, very cool. I appreciate all the things that you kind of, shared and taught. I feel like I got like a animation class today. So that was really awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think we've said a lot, and there's so much more obviously to say on this subject and so many other subjects. So I mean, I'd love to have you come back on another time and maybe dive deeper
yeah,
into like different elements and different aspects of art as well. Drawing art, illustration, and stuff. Um, and yeah, well, so do you have any? Do you want to let people know any websites or obviously your social media? You want to kind of shout that out?
well, anybody who's interested, they can find me pretty much anywhere. Well, I won't say anywhere. I'm only on a few platforms because I can only handle so much. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Um, at Action Hank Beard. Um, I stream on Twitch when I have the time, and that's basically just a way for people to kind of see what I do in real time. Also, Action Hank Beard there as well, and then my personal website where people can buy art from me directly. They can buy merch and things like that, and that's just theartofnuridurr.com, and you can find everything that I have going on from there as well. So,
Yeah, very
yeah,
cool. And because I actually forgot to mention, I bought a piece from you. The reason why we kind of connected was because I bought a piece from you way back in
yeah, this is a long
2016
time
or
ago.
2017. It was Sade, and I think it was, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I have it. So I've moved so many times, but I have it. It's still in the plastic because I'm like, I have to keep this protected. Um, so I don't know if you still have that available, but I love that piece. It's so beautiful. But your style is,
I
pretty
like
similar.
Sade, so I'll do
Yeah.
some more. I'm sure I'll do more art related to her in the future. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Very cool. But everyone can find you at all those different social links and stuff. And also,
yeah,
for the viewer and the listener, you can check out my stuff as well. It's my website is NicoleBurgessMarsh.com, and I've got links to my book, links to my jewelry and affiliate links, and other links to my shop, which has recommended books and recommended products that I personally like to use. So yeah, check that out. Check out Nuri's stuff as well, please, because it's amazing. And Nuri, thank you so much for joining me today. And
thank you for having me.
yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for listening and thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next episode.